is adjourned. The chair recognizes the Sergeant at Arms.
Madam Speaker, Her Excellency, Margaret Wood Hassan.
The House will attend to a prayer by House Chaplain Reverend Jeff Reardon, pastor of the South Congregational Church here in Concord.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning. I'd ask that we begin, as we always do, with a moment of silence, but especially today, keeping in mind two people. Let us pray for and keep in mind Marjorie Smith's husband, who's in the hospital with cancer. And of course, let us honor the memory of Officer Steve Arpel and his family and the entire community of Redwood. Let us begin with a moment of silence. Perplexing and ever-present God. Somehow you manage to be present in both sunshine and rain, in both past and future, in both constancy and change, in both light and darkness. Our prayer today is that you would continue to be present to us even when we are perplexed, to be our future when the past is gone and the present seems uncertain, our constancy in the midst of changing times, and that you would be the confounding darkness that scatters our own light, so that our eyes may perceive anew the divine light of truth, hope, and love that always comes from you. And so today, as we work and converse and talk over hot dogs and ice cream, bless us into places of grace and insight. Bless us into moments of unexpected humanity and humor. Stir us into places of still stronger leadership on behalf of the lives our work in this place touches. Turn what seem like shortages of money and time into feasts of creative thinking. And while we do our work here today, hold in your merciful care those in our lives and in our thoughts who are struggling with illness, who have lost someone they love, or who stand in need of your blessing. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
The chair recognizes the member from Franklin, Representative Lee Webb, who will now lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair recognizes Miss New Hampshire, Megan Cooley of Auburn, who will now sing our national anthem.
Speaker. Today, illness, Representatives Arsenal, Bishop, Bovair, Emerson, Gladys Johnson, Lundgren, McCloskey, Miller, DeBurge, and Young. Today, important business, Representatives Rebecca Brown, Burns, Coulomb, DeSimone, Maine, Emerson Brown, Friel, Hefner, Hirsch, Hodgson, Katsiantonis, Landau, Munns, Oligny, Pratt, Rhodes, St. James, Sullivan, Tambrillo, Thomas Walsh, and Ward. Today, illness in the family, Representatives Andrews, Gitzy, and Marjorie Smith.
These requests will be granted unless otherwise ordered by the House. The House will attend to the introduction of guests.
Madam Speaker, please welcome Sky Morabito and Justin Roberts, students at Winnicott High School and grandchildren of Representative Andrews Ahern, pages for the day.
Welcome to the New Hampshire House.
And Madam Speaker, please welcome Pam Gordon, guest of Representative Weslow, Nancy Heath, guest of Representative Frombach, Michelle Morabito and David Ahern, daughter and husband of Representative Andrews Ahern, Julie Steckbeck and Michael Steckbeck Piper, family of Representative Piper, Ben Tilton, guest of Representative Weber, the Honorable Jackie Silly, former member from Barrington, guest of Representative Malloy, John Milkowski and Rod Poe, guests of Representative Nelson, George Saunderson, guest of Representative Moffett, Gail Taylor, guest of Representative LeBake, Ben Tasker, guest of Representative Joseph Sweeney, fourth graders from Massway School in Lee, guests of Representative Kane, sophomores participating in the Human Behavior and Organizations class from Southern New Hampshire University, students and guests of Representative Danielson, and Brittany, Rick, Doreen, Anthony, and Benjamin Lopez, Liz and Steve Morgan, Ariel Velasquez, and Angel Gaona, guests of Representative Chanley. They are with us in the gallery today.
Welcome to the New Hampshire House. I know this typically happens at the end of the day, but given the circumstances, Representatives Tim Comerford and Curtis Grace request unanimous consent of the House in memory of Officer Arkell.
You are a rep?
No, I guess.
Madam Speaker,
How do I get up?
thank you for the opportunity to address the House. We are certainly shocked and saddened by the death of Brentwood police officer Stephen Arkell as a result of Monday's tragic events. His bravery, his sacrifice, and his dedication to duty should inspire us and remind us that our law enforcement community, from local patrol officers to sheriff's deputies to state troopers, put their lives on the line every day. They courageously and selflessly protect and serve the public. No task is too small, no risk too great in answering the call to duty. As a resident of Brentwood, I invite this august body to join me in honoring Officer Arkell's memory. I offer my heartfelt condolences to his wife Heather and two teenage daughters for their immeasurable loss. And I salute law enforcement community for their personal valor and an unwavering commitment to public safety, police officer Steve Arkell. May God watch over your family and may you rest in peace. Thank you.
Would the House please rise for a moment of silence? Chair recognizes Representative Sherwood for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would move that the eloquent remarks of the gentleman from Brentwood be placed in the permanent journal. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Sherwood moves that the remarks be placed in the permanent journal. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the remarks will be printed. The House will attend to a motion to amend House rules.
Madam Speaker, Representative Shirtliff and Chandler move the adoption of an amendment as proposed by the Rules Committee to House Rule 65, adding the following deadlines for legislative action.
Are you going to
Monday,
film
September
Hard Day at all?
15, 2014.
Could you get
first
some
day
of the
for
dog
incumbents
tricks
running
and then
for
the motorcycle
re-election
simulator?
to file
Bill Wynn
LSR
said he can't.
complete information. Friday, September
you can get some?
26,
Thank you.
2014. Last day
Want free ice
prior to the general election for incumbents running for re-election to file LSR
Are you going to be here at lunch?
information.
You want a free ice cream?
Friday, October 31st, 2014, last day to file 2014 interim study reports. Wednesday, November 12th, 2014, first day for all representatives to file LSRs with complete information. The 10-day sign-off period begins. Friday, November 5th, 2014, at 3 p.m. Last day to file LSRs with complete information. Friday, January 9th, 2015, at noon. Last day to sign off all LSRs. Friday, February 6th, 2015, last day to introduce House bills. Last day to amend House rules by majority vote.
The question is on the motion to amend the House rules. This will be a division vote. Will members please take their seats? This will be a division vote. stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members voted who were here when the question was put? The House will be attentive to the state of the vote. 307 having voted in the affirmative, 8 in the negative, the motion is adopted. Before we take up the Senate messages, I would just remind everyone what was already printed in the speaker's notice, and that is that whatever we don't finish today, we would be back tomorrow because this is the deadline for acting on all Senate bills. So I would just ask you to keep that in mind and make sure that your remarks are concise. The House will attend to a Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate concurs with the House in the passage of the following entitled bill with amendments, in the passage of which amendments the Senate asks the concurrence of the House. House Bill 1478, relative to oversight of child daycare agencies.
Representative Walls moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 1478 and is recognized to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a bill that has to do with what is posted online after the part of HHS that oversees child care providers does an inspection. The amendment was requested by the child care providers. It was agreed to by the Department of Health and Human Services, and our committee agrees with it. It simply expands, actually, what's posted online to include investigatory reports, monitoring reports, and final decisions related to licensing. I would ask you to support the committee and vote yes on this. Concurrence.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1478. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate asks concurrence with amendments on House Bill 1624, modernizing the juvenile justice system to ensure rehabilitation of juveniles and preservation of juvenile rights.
Representative Walls moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendments on House Bill 1624 and is recognized to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The amendments, the Senate added 2 amendments to this bill. It went to 2 committees, and each committee chose to add its own amendment. The first committee was the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they added an amendment that requires HHS to review all services provided to juveniles to determine if they are consistent with evidence-based practices and they are cost-effective. They have to provide a report to a number of committees, including Children and Family Law, by January 15, 2015. The second amendment was added by Senate Finance, and that has to do with when children can be released from the Sununu Center. Under the new standard, Sununu must release children after 6 months unless they show it's necessary to protect the safety of the child or the safety of the community. The committees feel that these are both good amendments and urge this body to support concurrence. Thank you.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1624. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate requests concurrence with its amendments on House Bill 565 relative to the authority of the Bank Commissioner to investigate certain unfair or deceptive acts or practices.
Representative Butler moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendments on House Bill 565 and is recognized to speak to this motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 565 is relative to the authority of the Bank Commissioner to investigate certain unfair, deceptive acts or practices. And the Senate amended this twice, once by the committee and once on the floor. The first amendment removed the ability to seek administrative fines for unfair and deceptive practices. The Banking Department and the Attorney General's Office both supported this approach because it still allows the Banking Department to take administrative actions such as revocation or suspension of licenses, but it still also allows the Attorney General's Office to seek civil penalties when there are unfair or deceptive acts and practices. The Senate floor amendment removed the reference to RSA 358K, which essentially takes back the language to its original before the bill was proposed, and keeps the language in RSA 38310 as it was. We ask you to support the concurrence.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 565. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate requests concurrence with its amendments on House Bill 1283 relative to a revival of a charter by a voluntary corporation or association.
Representative Butler moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 1283 and is recognized to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This one is a little more straightforward. This bill is relative to the revival of a charter by a voluntary corporation or association when it has been dormant. And the Senate language states that the revival will be in the public good. The House language said that the revival will materially benefit one or more of the corporation's legal constituents and will be in the public good. The Commerce Committee agrees with the change in the language, and we ask you to support the concurrence.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1283. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate concurs with the House in the passage of House Bill 1353 relative to recovery under uninsured motorist coverage and asks the concurrence of the House in its amendments.
Representative Butler moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 1353 and is recognized to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you heard, this bill is relative to recovery under uninsured motorist coverage. The Senate changed the effective date from 60 days after passage to January 1st of next year. We ask that you support the concurrence.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1353. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate concurs with the House in the passage of House Bill 624 with amendments and asks the concurrence of the House. House Bill 624, waiving the residency requirement for in-state tuition rates for veterans attending the university system of New Hampshire.
Representative Dial moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 624 and is recognized to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. waive residency requirements for in-state tuition for veterans attending institutions within the university system of New Hampshire. The Senate added 3 amendments. First of all, to extend the waiver of residency requirements to veterans attending institutions within our community college system from New Hampshire. And then the second and third amendments were a little puzzling at first. The second amendment was to reduce the 2011 capital budget for the Health and Human Service, for a Health and Human Service project designated for the New Hampshire State Hospital for repairs, renovations to the roof, windows, curtain wall for $4,050,000, to reduce it to $3,675,000. And then the third amendment was to use the remaining $3,375,000 to purchase New Hampshire hospital crisis beds to be available for veterans requiring emergency psychiatric care. These amendments were reviewed by and discussed with the chairs of the Health and Human Services Committee and the Public Works Committee, as well as the Health Education Committee. And it was voted unanimously to concur with the Senate amendment to House Bill 624, and we hope and ask that the House will support the Education Committee's recommendation for concurrence. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 624. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to it for the Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate asks concurrence with its amendments on House Bill 657, requiring state agencies to submit efficiency expenditure requests as part of the biennial budget process.
Representative Wallner moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 657. Ms. recognized to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It actually is a very minor amendment that the Senate made. This is a bill referring to efficiency expenditure requests during the biennial budget process. The Senate took out the word all in one of the paragraphs, so it will now read outcome and output performance measures displaying trends over time instead of all outcome measures. And I ask you to concur.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 657. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate asks concurrence with its amendments on House Bill 1146, establishing a committee to study the feasibility of funding a kindergarten to college career-ready program and a universal college savings account.
Representative Wallner moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 1146 and is recognized to speak to her motion.
Again, it's a fairly minor amendment, one that you've heard from the Senate before. Instead of having 3 Senate members on this study committee, they are asking to have 1, and we concur.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1146. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate asks concurrence with the Senate amendments on House Bill 1489, establishing a committee to study the establishment of a fund to reimburse costs associated with firefighters who have cancer.
Representative Wallner moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 1489 and is recognized to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can say ditto. The Senate would only like 1 member on this committee instead of 3. That's one of their amendments, and the other is they changed the quorum of the committee from 4 members, which was in the House version, to 3 members. Ask to concur.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1489. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate message.
Madam Speaker, the Senate requests concurrence with its amendments to House Bill 1579, relative to penalties for the injury or death of a domestic animal caused by trapping, which is in violation of laws or rules, and establishing a committee to study the administration of trapping laws and rules, and the issuance of trapping licenses by the Fish and Game Department, including education requirements and penalties for violations.
Representative LaVey moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 1579 and is recognized to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry, the screen just went blank here. The Senate amendment did a couple things. One of them was it fixed some language that we actually messed up on regarding dogs at large on RSA 46633. People that were trapping legally would have been liable for the injury to the dog that was off leash, that the owner had let off leash and got in trapping. They fixed that language for us. They also amended the bill to remove the mandatory minimum fine, but kept the violation as well as all the license revocation of 3 years. We would ask that you concur with this amendment. Thank you.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1579. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate amendment.
Madam Speaker, the Senate requests concurrence with its amendments to House Bill 1168 relative to employer documentation of worker eligibility to work in the United States.
Representative Andy White moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 1168 and is recognized to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 1168 was relatively simple, just requires employers to actually keep records of employees' ability to work in the United States. The Senate amendment requires employers to actually keep those records for a time period specified by the federal law. The Labor Committee agrees, and we would ask you to do the same. Thank you.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 1168. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to a further Senate.
Madam Speaker, the Senate concurs with the House on the passage of the following entitled bill with amendments. In the passage which amendments, the Senate asks the concurrence of the House. House Bill 422, relative to the adoption, revision, and amendment of municipal charters.
Representative Marjorie Porter moves that the House now concur with the Senate amendments on House Bill 422. The chair recognizes the member from Manchester, Representative Valencourt, to speak in opposition to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a 13-page bill dealing with charters, and the Senate added an amendment which basically strikes down the entire bill. So how you can concur with an amendment which strikes down the entire purpose of the bill is beyond me. The reason the Senate did this was because they discovered such major problems in the bill that instead of working with it, they applied this amendment to it. Section 6, applicability. The amendments to RSA 49B made by sections 1, 2, and 4 of this Act shall not affect municipal charters in existence or processes to adopt or amend municipal charters starting before the effective date of this Act. In other words, every municipal charter already in existence does not have applicability to this, sections 1, 2, and 4. And you may wonder, well, maybe that's just a small part of the bill, but of the 13 pages, only section 3 would not be applicable to this amendment, and that's only 7 lines of a 13-page bill. So the Senate, in its wisdom of realizing what a terrible mess this bill created, said it's just not going to apply to any town that already has a charter. Now, some people say that towns do not have charters, but in fact, if you go to the Secretary of State's office in the archives, you can find 5 huge boxes of a charter copy for every city and town in this state. They all have this plastic sheet around them because they are historic documents. We don't get them soiled. And they are, in fact, most of them, written by hand. In fact, I was looking at one yesterday that had George, not the third, but George the second as the leader at the time the charter was put into effect. Now, some people will say that this amendment does not affect the bill because it talks about processes. But again, you can read as well as I can, and it says, made by sections 1, 2, and 4 of this act shall not affect municipal charters in existence. And then it goes on with an or clause. We all know that anything preceding an or clause means that it will not affect anything there. So, that's one of the amendments the Senate has done that I cannot see as possibly concurring with because it in effect destroys the entire bill. The other amendment the Senate does, and it's back here on, and I don't expect you to read this entire bill. I expected this committee chair to tell us why she wanted to concur before I spoke, but that's on page 5 of the bill. And it talks about right now charter processes, very complicated business. I've been involved in the charter process in Manchester. In fact, I'm assuming a lot of you representatives have been in your own town or might in fact be involved now. The charter process involves getting the city or town to elect the charter commission, which reviews the process every 10 years. I think somebody told me in Claremont it was every 6 years. Rather arduous process. But a lot of problems arise during that review. When we did it in Manchester 10 years ago and then again last year, we hired a lawyer because there were so many concerns. And right now, in order for the charter, once completed, to be put on the ballot, it has to be signed off on by the Department of Revenue Administration, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of State. This Senate amendment, for some strange reason, would approve the one person most familiar with the process of election law in the state, the Secretary of State. By the way, the reason the Secretary of State was added to the charter review process was because in 1988, the New Hampshire Municipal Association realized that they needed help in charters, and they asked that the Secretary of State be put in there. And then a document was actually floating around the committee that said it was an anomaly that the Secretary of State was involved in this process. It's no anomaly. The Secretary of State is the chief election official of the state. When cities and towns dealing with their charter have problems, they should have the Secretary of State review it. And the reason we put the Secretary of State reviewing it in 1988 was because problems did come up, and they were so severe that charters were not legally binding once the problems were added in there. So why the Senate added these two amendments is beyond me. One, to remove the Secretary of State from the process. Remember we had a fight earlier in the year about whether cities could, and towns could no longer elect their secretary, their city clerks and town clerks. Well, these are the same people that try to take government out of the hands of the people by taking the election away from the people for the city and town clerks. That now come forward with this 13-page bill, which removes the Secretary of State from the process. It also has some very strange language about 60% versus 50% and other things. Those are the kind of things I would expect the Senate to have changed in their process of deliberating this bill. But again, they didn't do that. They realized after consulting with the chairman of the board of Manchester Alderman, I'm told, and the mayor, that Manchester would be devastated unless this amendment were added. But the amendment was drafted in such poor form that instead of exempting Manchester and the city, it exempts any municipality, that city or town, from this 13-page document. It makes it totally worthless, and certainly if you're going to pass the bill, you should have it go to a committee of conference where these problems, very real problems, can be fixed before it goes on to the governor. So I ask you to vote against the pending motion, so another motion can be made. Thank you.
Will the member yield to a question? The member yield to Representative Ruby. You may inquire.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you believe the citizens what has happened in issues with the past charter revisions and amendments, and that the Secretary of State's office has been instrumental in helping us work these issues in a positive way. These are all the complaints.
Would the member please suspend? The member was recognized for a question.
Would you believe?
Yes, I would believe that, because as I alluded to, revising a charter is a very arduous process. The charter is basically a constitution for a city or town. It's the basic law by which the city or town operates. As I mentioned, these go back to colonial times. Every city or town has one. It's on record with the Secretary of State's office. Only the Secretary of State and his office have the expertise to give this kind of advice, not only to Somersworth, but to every city or town, and to cut him out from the process seems counterproductive to me.
Would the member yield to a follow-up? The member yields.
This is part of the Constitution that every city must have a town or city charter.
Well, New Hampshire is not a home-ruled state. So basically, and in fact, if you remember during the debate on electing city and town clerks, I mentioned that we had tried to go the constitutional route to give cities the right to become home-rule states, and that not only failed to get the 2/3 at the voting box, it failed to get 50%. So it's clear that the people that want to take government away from the people are trying to make an end run around the Constitution by doing this. This is just an addendum to the bill that failed here earlier by about 3 out of 4 people voting against it. Do not make an end run around the Constitution by a bill that cannot possibly be worked on the way the Senate has meant it.
The question before the House is the motion to concur with the Senate amendment on House Bill 422. The chair recognizes the member from Hudson, Representative Fassler, to speak in opposition to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's nice to be able to stand up here and be in total agreement with my colleague from Manchester. It's not something that happens very often, but today I am in total and absolute agreement with his statements. I do want to focus on the floor amendment which was put forward in the Senate. And I've had some discussions, and some people feel that, well, because the law says, well, the process to adopt, revise, or amend municipal charters, it's not a problem. But the fact of the matter is, every community in the state of New Hampshire has a charter. My wife works at the library. She came home a couple of weeks ago, and she said, did you know that the town charter is at the library? I didn't know where our town charter was, but it's at the library. If that's what it is, it's a charter. If you look at the statutory construction, the definition of charter, it talks about the incorporation of a town in the charter. Prior to 1966, any revision to a charter had to come before this body. Only the legislature could amend a charter. Originally, one of the primary purposes of the charter was to set out the town bounds. As many of us know, those town bounds changed over the years, but it was only by an act of the legislature. So in 1966, the people were given the right to amend their charters locally, but that didn't happen until the legislature adopted RSA 49B1 and all the amendments that go along with that, because that set out the process for the amendments. My community, the town of Hudson, had a charter commission, and we adopted a new charter. And I think where it does say here to adopt a charter, it should have said a new charter, because we already had one. Now, in 1992, we did away with that charter. I had to come back to this body to get an amendment to the law to allow us to repeal it, because there wasn't any provision for us to repeal our charter and go back to our old charter. So, I think we're opening a can of worms here. I know we are. Because certainly, if we are not clear in what we do, we will be arguing about this sometime in the future. Because there will be a community that will want to adopt a charter, and a new charter. And it's easy to say adopt a charter, but it's adopting a new charter or revising their charter. And they're simply going to say, our charter was granted in 1738, and therefore, none of this applies. back here correcting a mistake that we're warning you about today. You can certainly do that, but it will be a mistake. It will be an issue that will come up, regardless of what you hear afterwards. Things done in haste like this, we act in haste, and we repent in leisure, and this floor amendment has not had the vetting that it should have. And while I do agree with my colleague from Manchester on the other concerns, those are not the reasons I'm here. Those battles were lost. This is a battle that hasn't been fought at any front yet, and I think we should go to a committee conference. So I urge you to turn down the pending motion so that a motion to allow us to hold a committee conference could be offered. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Will the member yield to a question?
I will.
The member yields to Representative Baldessaro. You may inquire.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. I just want to clarify what you just said, and I want to make sure I understood it right. You were saying this here, it goes against Article 39, which is in the changes in the town and city charters referendum. It says no law changing the charter or form of government of a particular city or town shall be enacted by the legislature except to become effective upon the approval of the voters. And it also goes into effect of, has to be approved and no conflict. Is that true?
Well, I think that's true as far as it goes, but the real issue here is the amendment that is being made to 49B, which is the statute that I referenced, and there are a lot of changes. For instance, within this right now, you can amend the charter or adopt a new charter with a 50% vote. This will require that to go to 60%, so you can get into one form of government by 50%, but not out except by 60%. And that's why this floor amendment was offered to say, well, if you had a charter that you adopted by 50%, you could still get out of it by 50%. But the unintended consequence is not recognizing, and even the Municipal Association, if you've seen their fact sheet on this, do not recognize the ancient charters as being actual charters. And so it's a lot of confusion here. So I think that probably adds to the confusion a little bit, but the bottom line is we do need a committee conference to really work on this issue particularly. Thank you very much.
Will the member yield to another question? The member yields to Representative Flanagan. You may inquire.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to Representative Hudson. Now, the chart, let me just be straight out. How does this affect the Secretary of State's office? Does that make them powerless?
Your question really goes to the section that the member from Manchester was referring to, and that is taking out the Secretary of State from reviewing the election laws to make sure that any elections within a community that adopts a new or revised charter is consistent with the rest of the election laws. I personally think that's a mistake, but that's not the reason that I'm objecting. But yes, you are correct. It does take the Secretary of State out, and I think ultimately that is a huge mistake.
The question before the House is the motion to concur on House Bill 422. The chair recognizes the member from Hampton, Representative Rice, to speak in support of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a prime sponsor of this bill, I'm really quite flabbergasted that this has generated this much discussion and this very eloquent opposition to this current motion of concurrence. The main purpose of this bill was very, very simple. It was to make it easier to understand the vote numbers required and the time intervals if a town, for example, if an SB2 town wanted to go to a council form of government. Now that has a lot of other things that pertain to other forms of government, whether you go up or down in your form of government and so forth. And so the amendments that evolved while it went through the committee process, by the way, you'll note that it's House Bill 422. It started real early. And here we are, and it's real late.